The light changed before anyone admitted it. Not brighter, worse. That's the only word I ever found for it. The world still looked normal at first. Cars moved, stores stayed open, kids walking to school carrying backpacks and staring at phones, but the sunlight stopped feeling familiar. Midday shadows looked sharper, the sky lost some of its deep blue and took on a pale metallic tone that photographers kept calling beautiful online. People joked about it for a while. Then they stopped mentioning it altogether. That's what humans do when something changes slowly enough. We adapt faster than we question. But I couldn't stop watching it, because I had already been watching the data. Solar spectra shifting, UV variability increasing, magnosphere compression events, ionospheric instability. None of it proved anything alone. That was the frustrating part. Every individual piece had an explanation. Every anomaly had an excuse attached to it. But the excuses stopped fitting together. That's when the fear started. Not panic, recognition. By 2027, storms felt different physically, not emotionally. Before major systems rolled in, the air pressure became so unstable, my ears would pop sitting inside my own house. Static shocks became constant. Sometimes reaching for a doorknob snapped hard enough to leave my fingertips numb for a second. At night, the clouds flickered from the inside for hours without rain, just silent, electrical pulsing inside towers of cloud, stretching higher than I'd ever seen growing up. Meteorologists kept using phrases like historic anomaly, unexpected persistence, unusual atmospheric blocking. They sounded confused without admitting they were confused. Forecasts started failing faster. 5-day models became 3-day models. 3-day models became guesses. The atmosphere wasn't behaving like a stable system anymore. It was reacting. That was the difference. People still talked about climate as if it were isolated from everything else, but Earth doesn't work in categories. Space weather affects magnetic shielding. Magnetic shielding affects atmospheric chemistry. Atmospheric chemistry affects pressure behavior, radiation balance, electrical gradients, biological systems. Everything connects, and once those systems begin coupling under stress, instability spreads everywhere at once. You could smell it near the coast first. The Gulf air change, hotter water and collapsing biological cycles created this strange mixture of salt, algae, decay, and chemical bitterness that hung in the humidity during late summer evenings. Some nights it drifted miles inland. The seasons stopped transitioning correctly too. Winter barely felt anchored anymore. Spring arrived in violent bursts. Heat lingered too long into the year, then vanished suddenly behind cold snaps that killed entire flowering cycles overnight. Trees budded too early. Insects emerged at the wrong times. Migration patterns shifted. The natural world was losing synchronization. And somehow people still acted like nothing fundamental was happening. Then the auroras came south. I'll never forget standing in a parking lot in Alabama watching green and crimson light moving above the tree line while everyone around me held their phones in the air smiling like tourists. The sky looked alive. Not beautiful, alive. The colors moved slowly overhead while transformers hummed louder than normal across the city grid. You could actually hear parts of the electrical system straining if you stood still long enough. Most people called it a once-in-a-lifetime light show. I remember feeling cold all the way through my chest because auroras that far south meant energetic particles were penetrating deeper into the atmosphere than they were supposed to. The shielding layer was weakening, and after that, strange things started becoming normal. Sleep got worse during geomagnetic events. People became more aggressive online and in public without understanding why. Headaches increased. Anxiety spread through entire populations like static electricity moving through dry air. Everyone blamed politics. Nobody wanted to talk about environmental stress affecting human biology because that sounded insane. But the body notices instability before ideology does. The electrical noise became impossible to ignore after a while. Substations growled at night. Long transmission lines crackled in humid weather. The air carried the smell of ozone before major storms rolled in. Sometimes the hair on my arms lifted slightly outdoors even when there was no thunder nearby. The world no longer felt electrically quiet. That's the best way I can describe it. Quiet was disappearing. Then the systems above us started failing. GPS drift, satellite outages, aircraft rerouting, communications disruptions blamed on space weather. That phrase became common enough to stop sounding alarming, which made it worse. Because once a civilization normalizes system degradation, it stops responding to warnings entirely. That was the White Horse phase. Not destruction, integration, normalization. Then came the summer the sun changed, not visually at first, Operationally, solar observatories began reporting increasingly unstable magnetic behavior. Coronal mass ejections clustered together instead of arriving as isolated events. Space weather alerts intensified week after week. Then one morning, every emergency system started triggering at once. Phones screamed alerts, news anchors panicked live on air, power companies issued emergency shutdown warnings. A major solar event was inbound. Most people still imagine solar storms as temporary inconveniences, pretty auroras, minor outages, internet problems. They had no idea how fragile modern civilization actually was. I remember the silence before it hit. Bird activity dropped sharply that morning. The air felt unnaturally heavy. Static discharge became so intense I could see sparks jump from my fingertips, touching metal surfaces even indoors. The sky carried this pale white glare near the horizon that made everything outside look overexposed. Then the grid started failing. Not all at once, rolling collapses, transformer explosions, voltage instability, communications blackouts. The sound was unforgettable. Not explosions, electrical strain. The deep humming of overloaded infrastructure vibrating through entire neighborhoods. At night, the horizon flashed blue-green from failing substations while aurora spread overhead, bright enough to cast moving shadows across the ground. That's when people finally became afraid. Because human beings can normalize almost anything except the sky behaving incorrectly. Radiation alerts spread globally within hours. Aircraft disappeared from radar. Satellites failed in clusters. Navigation systems drifted. Hospitals overloaded. Not with burns, exposure, headaches, nausea, neurological symptoms, skin irritation. The atmosphere itself had changed. Every breath outside carried the smell of smoke, ozone, burned insulation, wet concrete, and hot metal. Entire cities smelled industrial after the first major failures. Then the earthquakes escalated. Global, rapid, wrong. The ground moved continuously in some regions for minutes at a time. Roads split apart, bridges twisted, buildings groaned before collapsing under stress redistribution moving through the crust. People screamed constantly during the first planetary seismic wave, not because they were injured, because the human mind is not built to watch the earth move like water. Then the sunlight dimmed. Ash and aerosol spread through the upper atmosphere while ionized layers distorted incoming light. Noon looked like late evening. The sun appeared darkened behind heavy atmospheric scattering. The moon rose blood red through the haze, and suddenly ancient descriptions stopped sounding symbolic. That realization terrified people more than the disasters themselves, because deep down everyone understood the same thing at once. This had happened before. Then came the silence, a brief pause after the first wave passed. Electrical noise dropped, wind weakened, seismic motion slowed. The whole planet felt suspended. People thought it was over. It wasn't. The radiation pulse had arrived first, the ejecta mass lagged behind it. When the physical material finally entered the atmosphere, the sky ignited. Orbital debris began falling visibly across the horizon night after night. Satellites, metallic fragments, burning particulate, all descending through a destabilized atmosphere already overloaded with plasma and ash. The protective layers above Earth had collapsed into view. Then the fire spread. Forests ignited first, dry lands burned next. Cities followed after infrastructure ruptured under electrical and seismic stress. The air became almost impossible to breathe near urban regions. Every inhale tasted chemical. People wrapped cloth over their mouths that turned black within hours. Then the rain changed. Red runoff streaked down streets and buildings as iron-rich particulate mixed with atmospheric moisture and ash. Again, ancient language stopped sounding metaphorical. That was the true horror, not simply destruction, recognition. The realization that stability had never been permanent, only maintained. And once the system crossed its threshold, every layer failed together. Not instantly, sequentially, like a planet remembering what it was capable of becoming.